Good evening, good afternoon, good morning. Hello to all of you tuning in from around the world, and for those of you watching on the replay. I hope you're staying happy and healthy. My name is Luke. I'm a producer here at How To Academy, and welcome to what I'm sure is going to be an absolutely brilliant event. Today we are very lucky to be joined by Dr. Amanda Nimon-Peters, Professor of Leadership at Hult International Business School, with a PhD from Cambridge in Behavioural Science and experience as a team leader at Procter Gamble, a Dean of the Business School, a Board Director for a UK housing charity, and a science team leader in Antarctica. Amanda's work mixes science with business expertise, complex theory, and practical advice. Her new, very excellent book is Working with Influence, 9 Principles of Persuasion to Accelerate Your Career, and it's out now. And that, of course, is why you are all here today, to hear from an expert about some vital principles for influencing people and outcomes in both physical and digital working scenarios, which hopefully will help you kickstart, accelerate, or even transform your careers. So after a 40 to 50-minute lecture, Amanda will take questions from you, the audience. So please type any you have in that little Q&A function, wherever it is on your screen, and I promise I'll get to them at the end. Well, that's more than enough from me. So without further ado, it is my absolute pleasure to welcome Dr. Amanda Nimon-Peters. Amanda, over to you.
Thanks so much, Luke, and welcome to everybody today. As Luke has said, today's talk is all about helping you to make the most out of this approach to influencing in the workplace. The book was published just last week, Working with Influence, 9 Principles of Persuasion to Accelerate Your Career. Now, once upon a time, back quite some time ago now, I actually started my career as a scientist working in the Antarctic. And this slide here is a montage of 3 print photographs. On the left-hand side there in the red overalls, that is actually me with a pickaxe digging out one of our huts because we left them there over the winter. On the right-hand side, you can see a hut in which we kept our food and our cooking equipment. And over the roof of that hut, those little tents, they're the ones we slept in. We had a tent each. But most importantly, in the foreground of this slide is a picture of a gentoo penguin, that cute, furry little creature. And I can honestly say that at one point in the world's history, I was probably one of the foremost authorities in the world on gentoo penguins. Probably not true today. But starting my career in this way was very helpful for what was to come afterwards, because one thing about working with penguins is you cannot ask them what they think. You cannot ask them their opinion. And as it turns out, when it comes to the realm of influence, what people think influences them and other people turns out to be not a very good predictor of what actually influences people. And so it really helped that I started my career working with a creature that couldn't tell me what its opinion was. By background, academically, by training, I'm a behavioural scientist, first at the University of Adelaide, then at the University of Cambridge. And through quite a lot of academic studying and research, I came to the end of that. I did a master's, a postdoc, a PhD, a postdoc, and then I moved into the world of business. So I was recruited by Procter Gamble into their Western European headquarters at the time in Brussels. I worked for P&G in Brussels, in Rotterdam, in London for quite a while. I was then brought out to Dubai. And in all of this, my role was to take insights that we know are true from science about what influences people's behavior, how they respond to messages, etc., and to apply that to improving our daily business activity. Now, Procter & Gamble is a fantastic company, and I loved working there. But after 10 years of working in a company with 160,000 people globally, I wanted to know what it was to make all the decisions for myself. And so, like a lot of people at the time, I launched a startup. I hired 2 women. On the left there, that's Dina from Saudi Arabia. On the right, Deepa from India. And together, our proposition to our customers is that with scientific interventions, we can make your core people more effective after the intervention than they were before. And basically, I don't care if the starting place is at a 2 out of 10 or an 8 out of 10. The goal is that wherever you start, you will be more effective after the intervention than you were before. And that's really the goal of the book, is to teach you insights to make you more effective after you start applying them than you were before. Now, during this period, I worked with a lot of big companies. It's really interesting being a consultant and working inside all these different companies. And then after a period of time, I was actually offered the chance to go back into academia, now as the dean of a business school. I joined Hult International Business School. I became dean of the campus in Dubai, and I had to explain to people that I was the dean and not this guy here. And people think that was kind of funny. One of the reasons they thought that was kind of funny is because this is exactly the guy they were expecting. And I proved it to them by going to Google Images and typing in dean of a business school, and lo and behold, this is exactly the sort of person that turned up. So I had to say to people, yes, it is this small, noisy Australian who's the dean, not this guy. But now today, I'm in probably what was the best job I've ever had. I'm a full-time professor. I'm a professor of leadership. I teach courses in data analysis and leadership. Actually, most of the courses I teach are a combination of both. And I teach at a postgraduate level on the MBA, the Executive MBA, and the DBA, the Doctor of Business Administration programs. Okay, so given that today and the approach of How To Academy is all about how to make you more effective, what I wanted to kick off with is to start, before I give you insights on influence, I wanted to give you insights on how you actually develop and how you get better. How do we improve in our skills in a work environment? So the question is then, how do we learn to be effective at work? And I'm just going to use a very simple visual. It's one you'll all be familiar with. You all will have seen something called a learning curve. And what the learning curve demonstrates is that, let's say you go in, you've just graduated, you've gone into a job, or you're going to a completely new area or something where you're really out of your depth. At first, your learning curve is extremely steep. Because what you're doing is you're trying a lot of different things in order to build up a toolkit and a set of processes and techniques that will make you more effective. And during that period, your learning curve is really steep. But what we know about the learning curve is there comes a certain point where the learning curve plateaus. And that is typically because your focus changes. So while you know that you don't really know what you're doing, you're working on improving your technique and your capability. What happens is, after a certain period of time, you decide, okay, I know how to do my job now. And then your focus changes. You stop focusing on developing technique and capability, and you start focusing on just getting on with delivering your job. And in this respect, we're actually not that different as humans from a mouse being put into a maze. When you put a mouse into a big, complex maze for the first time, and it can smell a cheese in the distance, it works out how to move through the maze. It tries different things that don't work, and it comes back to the beginning. It explores and it experiments. But after a certain period of time, it works out how to get to the cheese. Now take that mouse and put it into the cheese. It doesn't explore, sorry, into the maze. Now, hopefully there's no mice in your cheese. Take that mouse and put it into the maze, and it no longer explores. It goes straight for the end result. And that's effectively what you're doing at work. As we gain experience, we think that we continue to develop our expertise, but statistically significantly, what we are most likely to be doing is relying on the techniques and the tools and the processes that have already worked for us in the past. And what we're actually learning is how to adapt those same techniques to new environments. We're not working on developing our techniques. Now, within a business context, what we know from research is that the risk of not learning new techniques or developing your expertise or your capability is the highest when you're under continual pressure to deliver results. Because when you have to deliver a result this week, the next week, the week after, you don't have time to experiment around and try out new techniques. You're focused on getting to that cheese as quickly as you can. And because of this, and there have been many studies in this area, great bodies of research by people like Carol Dweck and Anders Ericsson, and what we can conclude from it all is that if you are not actively trying to improve your technique, then chances are you're not improving your technique, because you're not focused on improving your technique. You're focused on delivering the result that you get to with the technique. It sounds like a small distinction. It's actually a big one about where your focus is and therefore where you're developing. Now, what's really important also is that expertise is not an all or nothing phenomenon. It's not that you hit it one day and then that's it. You don't go from 0 to 180 by reading one book or taking one training course. Development of expertise occurs through successive micro developments. It's step by step by step. And that's one of the ways in which, in terms of learning technique, I've actually designed this book, is that you do not need to read this whole book in order to make progress. When the book arrives at your doorstep, what I recommend you do is pick one chapter. If you only have 20 minutes, only spend 20 minutes. Look for some technique, some takeaway, and there's lots of examples and exercises and ways to help you act on the science written into the book. Use this book to make small incremental improvements, and that's the way to build your expertise. Okay, why else then do we need a science-based approach to influence at work? Well, one really good reason for that is that actually we're not as good at influencing other people as we think we are. If you have in your mind, and I hope all of you right now have in your mind, a big meeting or a presentation, or you're going after a new client, or you want to influence an outcome or a decision that matters to you at work, what typically happens when we think, okay, I need to influence this situation, is that the activities we start engaging in order to influence it, that outcome, are not as effective as we think they are. Let me explain. Our most common techniques when we try to influence people are a set of techniques that can be categorized as rational persuasion. We use logical reasons, we use careful explanation. I've chosen specifically here a checklist. You know, we tell people, we'd like you to do this because of this and this and this and this, because we think logical explanation is what influences people. Now, amongst the audience listening now, there will be some people who think, well, yes, I do. I'm very influenced by rational, I'm logical, I'm fact-based, and that's how I make my decisions. And there will be some people in the audience who are thinking, no, actually, I go with my instinct, with my gut, with my emotion, what my heart tells me I should do. And I would like to say to both of those groups of people that you're kind of wrong. Okay, so the chart that I'm showing here, I've borrowed from a neuroscientist who's synthesized together a lot of information that we've got from neuroscience about how the brain works. And what this chart shows us is that, yes, there is some thought over on the right side that is purely rational and purely reason. And there is some thought that is purely emotional or gut instinct. But most of our thinking, most of the time, is both. And actually, the emotion comes first. So if you were to open a cupboard in which you saw a set of glasses on a shelf, well, the glasses would be the facts. The shelf is the emotion. So the emotion is underlying, and it affects where we pay attention, what we pay attention to, and how our central processing unit codes that information. And what this boils down to is that emotion, rather than logic, actually drives most of our decisions. Now, I work in a business school, so I'm used to talking about this in relation to purchase decisions. People think that giving their consumer lots of really good reasons as to why they should buy something is the most effective way. But actually, most purchasing decisions are made first on an emotional basis. And then when you stop people and ask them, okay, why did you buy that? Or you ask them in a questionnaire, the reasons they give are post-rationalization, they're justifications, but the decision was made on the basis of emotion. Now, isn't that interesting? Because we've established that emotion drives decisions, but actually, when you attempt to influence people, you use logic. And studies show us that rational persuasion is the most commonly used tactic for attempting to influence at work, particularly when you're influencing, let's say, upwards or sideways, which of course is most relevant. If you're just trying to influence people who report to you, well, you don't even necessarily need to use pure influence. You should, but you might just simply tell them what to do. But when it comes to attempting to influence people, rational persuasion is what we use most often because we do what seems sensible. We don't do what is most effective. We do what seems to make sense because we think we're logical and rational, but it isn't what influences people because people are not as logical and rational as they think they are. Now, this can all be summarized in one of the key principles. There are 9 principles overall. I've chosen 2 that are easiest to communicate to you in a short period of time and give you something you can actually act on. But principle 6 is about the fact that reasoning is the most common influencing tactic that we use in the workplace. It's been measured. And chapter 6 is about helping you to come up with better reasons than the reasons you're using today. And the visual I like to use to communicate this concept is the idea that you're giving today lots of reasons, but a much more effective approach is to use rewards, emotional content, benefits, things that make people feel rather than messages designed to make people think. So let's look at how could you apply this, maybe tomorrow, maybe next week, maybe on the weekend. So imagine your goal is to have somebody you know pick you up on the way to an event, a meeting, a party, the workplace. If you were given this scenario, or if this scenario occurs and you think, right, I want to influence this person to pick me up on the way to an event, then your most common approach, the most likely approach you'll take would be to come up with logical, rational reasons like, we can split the cost of the parking. It's barely out of your way. This direction avoids the road toll. These all sound like good ideas, and I'm not saying they won't work. That's not the point. The point is not whether you've been successful or not in the past. The point is, how can you be more successful? Your friend might come and pick you up, or even just your colleague or someone you met, because it's barely out of their way. But how could you be more successful in the future than what you are being today? How can you increase the likelihood that you get the outcome that you're looking for? The answer is to use reward or emotion-based reasons rather than logic-based reason. Something like, I've got important information we need to discuss before this meeting. I've got a job opportunity. I need to tell you about it, that this is something that's perfect for you. Or alternatively, it might be, a potential date you could go on with somebody that I met that's perfect for you. But something that gets that person excited, something that's good for you, something that's rewarding or that's beneficial, but has an emotional component. Or perhaps this one, I just baked muffins and they're still warm. Particularly if this is around lunchtime, for example, that could be one that influences people. So this is thinking about rewards, benefits, and emotions rather than logical reasons. This is a way for you to improve how you approach people and how you influence them. In fact, a health scientist called Valerie Curtis, who did a lot of work on how to influence people to do things that are good for their health, said that a person is more likely to pick you up on the way to a party because arriving at the party with you makes them look popular, sexy, and more attractive than they are for any logical reason at all. Okay, so we talked about the fact that emotion intertwines with cognition and that the emotion comes first. So another key takeaway that I want you to have from this scientific insight is that people actually code how you make them feel. When we're giving our logical reasons, we're thinking about the factual content and all of those reasons and that rational persuasion as to why you should do something. But first up, the information about how you're making somebody feel, that emotional data, that is being coded in their head. And what neuroscience tells us is that brains get this information first and they treat it as if it is high quality, rational data. It comes in first. And so people are going to code how you're making them feel. That's an important thing to remember in your influencing attempts. Okay, for the next principle, I want to take you through an exercise. Now, this is an exercise I would normally run in class,